Night shift at the cursed mine, 7 sinister rules to uncover the terrifying truth and stay alive. Sarah stood at the entrance of the Silverstone mine, heart racing, the darkness looming around her like a predator ready to pounce. This was at the place where all the whispers began, where nightmares took root. With her 6-year-old son Timmy depending on her, she couldn't back down. Dreams of a steady paycheck were drowned in a horror story she never wanted to be part of. The air felt thick with something unspeakable, a weight that settled in her stomach, a warning that came wrapped in dust and decay. As she stepped inside, the cacophony of darkness swallowed her whole. Flickering dim lights illuminated the old, peeling walls, revealing symbols etched in the rock, warnings from those who came before. Every calloused hand that passed hers was a reminder she wasn't the only one diving into this horror for survival. Just stick to the rules, they said with dark smiles. 7 rules of survival they recited, words that felt more like a curse than a guide. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue, but now, whispers slid through the air like ice. The camaraderie faded when the sun dipped low. Shadows twisted into grotesque forms as they recounted stories of miners who had vanished without a trace, stories that clawed at her sanity. And there she was, alone in the dark, inhaling dust that pronounced imminent danger. The others were drawing closer, but their eyes seemed to reflect the cold death that had claimed the underground. Panic rose in her throat as the casual way her coworkers shared this knowledge felt like they were part of something bigger, a grim secret that wrapped around their laughter. What was that flicker in her peripheral vision? Shadows that didn't belong. It felt like the mine itself pulsated in response to her fear, a living entity breathing with malevolence. She stumbled, felt the walls close in on her, every breath dragging in the stale air heavy with despair. The symbols glowed faintly in the darkness, almost yearning for her attention. Were they warnings or invitations? Day after day, she returned home to find Timmy restless, caught in nightmares that had his small body racked with terror. "Mommy, the mine calls to me," it whispers at night. Each time, her heart crumpled into itself. She couldn't protect him from the monstrous secrets burrowed in their community. The town, once a safe haven, was now a fortress where neighbors wore masks of suspicion. The disappearance of Paul, her neighbor and once a source of support, twisted the knife deeper, leaving her grappled with dread. His absence echoed in every closed window and hushed conversation. Each shift in the mine morphed fears into reality, dragging her deeper into a chasm of darkness. Sweat dripped down as she ventured through tunnels that felt alive, morbid shadows teasing her sanity. And then it happened, the chilling cry, echoing through the chamber, a voice desperate for release. Was it Paul? Was he down here, trapped beneath the weight of stone and secrets? Something twisted inside her, a primal instinct to flee, but there was nowhere to run. As the ground rumbled and walls trembled, Sarah found herself teetering on the edge of that darkness, staring directly into its abyss. Would she be the next name whispered among the 7? Would the mine take her too? Treachery lurked in the shadows, and she would uncover the truth before it consumed her whole. The darkness beckoned, promising her everything, yet threatening to take it all away. The low rumble of the earth beneath Sarah's feet seemed almost alive, thrumming with a heartbeat that echoed her own. She pressed her back against the cold, gritty wall, eyes darting through the gloom. The cries, that haunting wail, had faded now, leaving an oppressive silence that swallowed her despair whole. Each rustle in the shadows made her jump, an electric jolt splaying fear across her limbs. It felt as if the mine itself was watching. The walls appeared to shudder, like they held secrets buried deep, secrets that wanted to claw their way out. The history of loss hung heavily in the air, wrapped around her like a dark shroud. As she navigated through the pathways, the flickering lights brought forth chilling memories of her fellow miners. Each had their own story, a reason for binding themselves to this cursed place. It gorged on their fears, while it whispered promises of prosperity. Did Paul, perhaps, come down here chasing those same shadows? And what of the others, had they found glory or damnation? She clutched the edge of her jacket, squeezing tightly as the chill seeped in. How could she leave her son Timmy to face this nightmare without his mother? He needed her. But how many more nights could she endure? Distorted faces danced along the periphery of her mind, pain etched in their features. It was too much. Then she heard it again. A voice, broken and rasping, echoed from the depths. No, it was more than a voice, it was a conversation. Muffled thoughts shared in desperation. Who was down there? Could it be Paul, trapped in the mine's relentless embrace? Was there anyone left to help him? The poles of obligation and terror twisted around her, not knowing which thread would snap first. The air became fetid. The lights dimmed, casting shadows like fingers reaching for her. Sarah dared to step forward, a reluctant participant in this macabre performance. Is anyone there? She called, her voice swallowed by the endless void. Silence answered, her instincts screamed for her to turn back, to flee while she still could. But the whispers swirled, wrapping around her like a sinister lullaby. They coaxed her along, deeper into the bowels of the mine, a siren-esque call that promised understanding, promised answers. Rounding a corner, she arrived at a fork in the path. One way led to a silvery glimmer, the other descended into a deeper anonymity, an area suffocated by darkness. The shimmering pathway seemed so out of place, almost inviting. Yet, the darkness ahead felt like a predator lurking, waiting to consume her doubts and fears. As she stood frozen, another cry echoed. Panic surged through her. Someone was down there, possibly in pain. Swimming through doubt, she took one desperate step forward. I'm coming. Hold on. But the darkness seemed to respond, rolling forth like a wave, smothering her words before they could escape her lips. With a sudden rush, the walls appeared to throb and pulse like a heart yearning for life, and she felt a heat rising from the depths of the mine. The ambient whispers shifted. They turned frantic, insistent. Something was awakening beneath their feet. Drawing a sharp breath, Sarah took cautious steps toward the dim light. She had to know. The mine would reveal its secrets, one way or another. A loud crack reverberated through the tunnel, and the ground under her shook violently. The floor trembled, and a rumble echoed like thunder, drowning out her thoughts. What was that? She gasped, fear clawing at her throat. Would she get the answers she sought, or would the mine claim her as it had claimed so many before? And just then, a deep growl emanated from deep within, vibrating through the walls, sending shockwaves of terror into her very soul. Suddenly, the lights went out, leaving her to confront whatever monstrous presence now filled the chamber of shadows. What lay in the depths, waiting for her to make a choice? The darkness swallowed her whole, a suffocating shroud that twisted and turned with unseen fears. Sarah's heart raced, pounding against her ribs like a wild creature desperate to escape. She reached out, fingers brushing against the gritty wall, searching for any anchor in this abyss. The growl reverberated again, louder this time. It curled around her like a serpent, slithering through her mind and freezing her limbs. What had awoken? Was it the restless spirits of the mine, or something more primal? The very thought sent shivers crawling up her spine. Get a grip, Sarah. She whispered to herself, forcing courage into her bones. She was a mother, and mothers didn't run from monsters. Clenching her trembling hands into fists, she took a cautious step forward, her breath shallow and rapid. As she moved, the air grew thicker, suffused with the scent of decay and wet earth. The silence was deafening, broken only by the erratic beats of her heart, thundering in her ears. She strained to make out shapes in the dark, the faint glow from the fork she had just left now a mere memory. With each step into the void, she strained her ears, trying to capture any sound, any signal that she wasn't alone. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of anguish and fear that wrapped around her like barbed wire. They beckoned her, pleading for release, but she didn't recognize the voices. With every inch she advanced, a deep-rooted dread clawed at her sanity. Suddenly, flickering lights blinked back to life, casting harsh, distorted shapes on the walls. Shadows jumped and writhed, playing tricks on her eyes. In their midst, she thought she glimpsed movement, a dark silhouette shifting against the shimmering stones. "Paul!" she called, her voice cracking. It was a desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. The silhouette froze before darting back into the gloom. "Wait!" she cried, panic lacing her tone. A shuffling sound echoed in reply, urgent and erratic. She strained to hear more, terror mixed with determination. Just then, the growl returned, deeper, more threatening. It resonated from the depths of the mine, vibrating through Sarah's body like an earthquake. The mine itself seemed alive, groaning under pressure, threatening to unleash its horrors. In an act of desperation, she followed the sounds, picking up speed as adrenaline flooded her system. The ground quaked beneath her with each hurried step, and she stumbled. Her fingers grazed something cold and smooth. An old helmet. She recognized it from her days working alongside Paul. A chill spiraled through her. If he had been here, and if it was this helmet, then what had happened to him? Her heart sank. She had to find him. Gathering her courage, she pressed deeper into the mine, the lights flickering like ghostly phantoms, illuminating her path in stuttering flashes. The walls hummed, a dissonant rhythm that sent tremors through her very core. And then, just as her hope began to swell, the lights flickered violently, plunging her once again into the crushing dark. The growl resonated anew, not just a threat but a challenge, a warning. This wasn't just a mere rescue mission anymore, it was about survival. With the sound of footfalls echoing behind her, Sarah forced her frozen limbs to move. She had to choose a path, and fast. The dim sparkle of light in one direction beckoned, promising safety or an exit. The other, shrouded in an almost palpable darkness, called forth her worst fears. "Which way?" she muttered, panic flooding her voice. Voices deeper in the mine cried out, dissonant and haunting, and there, in the shadows, she caught a glimpse, eyes, glimmering with hunger, staring back at her. Was she ready to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting whatever lurked in the deepest parts of the mine? Time was running out. The flicker of light pulsed like a heartbeat, urgent and unsteady. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to run. But she hesitated, breathing hard, feeling the weight of the choices pressing on her chest like a stone. The eyes in the shadows remained fixed on her, glimmering with a feral hunger that twisted her stomach. She could almost feel their heat, the promise of a hunt lurking just underneath the surface. She scanned her options again, light or darkness. Each path seemed to whisper threats, gripping at her mind like icy fingers. "Please, Paul," she murmured, clutching his helmet closer. The familiarity felt cold against her skin now, a haunting reminder of what was behind. She had to choose, but what if neither path led to him? What if both were traps? The growl rumbled once more, louder and closer, vibrating through the walls. It was alive and watching, closer than she'd realized. In that moment, the darkness seemed to shift, the dense shadows undulating like a living creature. Sarah's pulse quickened, each beat a drum urging her to act. "Just go, Sarah," she hissed, willing her weary legs to move toward the faint glow. She stumbled away from the suffocating darkness, into the thin halo of light. There was a sudden rush of clarity, though it came with a sharp pang of dread. The light was dim, barely illuminating a corridor that branched deeper into the mine. As she moved forward, the whispers escalated, morphing into cries that echoed off the walls. They threaded through her thoughts, weaving in despair, pleading for release and retribution. They were voices she once knew, fading but familiar. Her heart ached with memories, friends lost, laughter replaced by fear. What happened here? She gasped, mind racing as she pressed on. The lights flickered again, and Sarah half expected the darkness to consume her whole. She stumbled into a wider chamber, and the light fell away. Before her stood a mine cart, rusted and untouched for years. The metallic creak broke the silence, sending icy pins of panic running up her spine. As she stepped closer, her hand grazed the side of the cart. No. It couldn't be. Scraps of torn fabric clung to the edges. The unmistakable, jagged pattern of Paul's work shirt. She froze, breath hitching in her throat. The mine was a grave not just for minerals, but for people. Shadows of lost voices hung heavy in the air, lamenting like a dirge. She felt their pain seep into her bones, each cry resonating like a hammer against her skull. Suddenly, a rush echoed through the chamber. A figure burst forth from the depths, torn and wild. Disheveled hair, sunken eyes framed with despair. It was Paul. "Run!" he screamed, voice cracking under the weight of his urgency. But before she could comprehend, a darkness lunged from the shadows, a writhing mass that would drown her in terror. "Sarah!" Paul cried, his voice a lifeline. "You can't stay here." But it was too late. The growls erupted into a cacophony that drowned everything out, a monstrous choir of anguish. Sarah felt a fierce heat behind her and the space shifted, collapsing into chaos. She lunged toward Paul, grabbing his hand just as the shadows crashed down like a tidal wave, threatening to engulf them both. The world around her blurred, a whirlpool of cries and fear. But one thought pierced through the noise: was she really ready for what the darkness would unveil? With that looming dread, she knew they had to escape, but what awaited them beyond the darkness was uncertain. Which way? She gasped, her heart racing against fear, and just as Paul opened his mouth to respond, the shadows pushed forward, feeding on their fear, threatening to pull them back into the abyss. Their choices were dwindling, and time was slipping through their fingers like sand. What awaited them outside the mine's dark grip? Was escape truly possible? Paul clutched Sarah's hand, the grip tightening as the shadows writhed around them. The noise was deafening, a blend of growls, howls, and whispers. They stole at the edges of her mind, memories of laughter turning into screams, shadows elongating until they consumed the last flickers of light. "Follow me!" Paul shouted, and without waiting for a reply, he darted down the corridor they had just come from, dragging her along. Sarah stumbled, her heart pounding, a fear-induced rhythm that whispered of doom. Every step felt like an eternity, the darkness clawing at them, desperate to reclaim its prey. "Where do we go?" she gasped, trying to match his speed, but the shadows seemed to close in, increasing their pace. Each echo of a footfall was an ominous reminder that something was chasing them, something alive with malice. "Keep moving," he barked, his voice raw but urgent. As they ran, the corridor twisted and turned, branching off into darker tunnels. Each new passage whispered promises of safety but bore only more terror. The lights flickered sporadically, revealing fleeting visions, faint silhouettes caught in the corners of her eyes, joined in that sickeningly familiar wail that clawed at her sanity. A sharp turn led them into an open cavern. The air was thick with dust, motes swirling like trapped souls dancing amidst the debris. A distant echo resonated, reverberating off the cavern walls, growing louder until it seemed to drown out their breaths. "Which way?" she cried, choking on the thick air. The shadows seemed to swirl in anticipation, they wanted them to make a choice, to halt, to hesitate. "Over there." Paul pointed to an archway half hidden in a crevice. Its edges were lined with darkness, pulsating like a living thing, beckoning them closer. As they rushed toward it, something thudded behind them, a solid, heavy sound. Sarah whipped around just in time to see a shadowy form emerge, monstrous and towering. It was grotesque, a mix of featureless mass and thrashing limbs, surging toward them with preternatural speed. "Run!" Paul yelled, dragging her violently to the archway. Sarah didn't hesitate, terror fueled her legs, propelling her forward until they burst into the new passage. The heavy stench of damp earth and decay smacked her in the face, the corridor was narrow, the stones damp and cold. Each breath felt like inhaling dread, tinged with the acidic scent of mold. What lay ahead? "Keep close," Paul urged, and she nodded, swallowing her fear. Beneath the weight of uncertainty, they sprinted, shadows swirling at their backs. With each desperate footfall, the darkness clawed closer, relentless and insatiable. "Do you think it can follow us in here?" Sarah's voice trembled, a small whisper beneath the cacophony of terror thrumming around them. "I don't know," Paul shouted, glancing back, eyes wide with panic. "But we have to keep moving." As they continued through the corridor, Sarah's thoughts spun wildly. They had to find a way out, but where? The mine was sinister, alive with whispers and cries, as if the very walls were mourning. And what of Paul? Was he truly here, or had she conjured him from her memories, a hope against the dark? Up ahead, a flickering light materialized, casting long shadows along the stone walls. It seemed to beckon, a spark of hope or another trap. "Do you see that?" Paul panted, pointing again, desperation clawing at his voice. "Yes," she replied. Was it a way out, or another illusion forged by the mind to lure them deeper? "Stay close," he repeated, fear heating his breath. Instinctively, they pressed toward the faint glow, every heartbeat resonating with terror. Was this the key or another path down to the darkness below? As they drew closer, the light pulsed, revealing ghostly figures at its fringes, faces twisted in agony, drawn to them. A chill ran through her as she realized what if whatever had claimed them was waiting just beyond the light, stirring with anticipation. "What if we can't escape?" she whispered, voice breaking. But Paul squeezed her hand tighter, his determination igniting against the dread. "Then we fight," he declared. As the shadows began to swirl more aggressively, clawing at their heels, they stepped into the light together and the ground rumbled beneath them. But before they could react, the chamber erupted in a cacophony, dimming the light to a mere flicker, leaving them in the grip of an ominous dark abyss. What horrors awaited them now? Could they truly fight what lurked in the shadows, or was this just the beginning of their journey into despair? The darkness enveloped them as the light flickered out, a terrifying void pressing in from all sides. Sarah felt the hair on her neck rise, her heart racing like a hammer pounding against her ribcage. A cold sweat trailed down her spine as the echoes of distant cries clung to the air, mingling with the palpable fear that thrummed in her veins. "Paul!" she gasped, her voice barely slicing through the enveloping silence. "Where are we?" "Hold on," Paul whispered urgently, dragging her further into the crushing pitch. They moved slowly, feeling their way along the damp walls, the rocky surface scratching at their palms. Every rustle and shift sent shivers through her, every sound replicating her own racing pulse. Just beyond the reach of their touch, the sounds grew low growls that seemed to reverberate from the very ground they stood on. Each noise grew more elaborate, more chilling, as if a macabre orchestra had taken up residence around them. "Paul, we need to get out of here." The brightness of her hope dwindled, crushed under the weight of despair. "What if the shadows find us?" "They won't," he replied, but even in his voice, she could hear the doubt simmering beneath the surface. "We just have to figure this out. Together. Together." The word felt fragile, like a spider's web waiting to be shattered. They stumbled deeper into the darkness, fear tugging at them. Suddenly, a guttural whisper sliced through the night, just above a low roar that seemed to come from all around. "Can you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "What does it say?" Paul hushed, straining to make sense of the ominous murmurs. The voice twisted through the air, drifting like smoke. "Leave, before it's too late." Without thinking, she squeezed his hand tighter, as if their grasp alone could shield them from whatever whispered threats lurked within the depths. "Did you hear it?" she breathed, panic surging anew. "It's trying to warn us. What if it's right? We have to keep going." Paul's voice held a note of certainty, but it wavered with each syllable. "It might be lying. It wants to distract us." They pressed forward, breaths coming quicker as they hastened their pace. But then, the ground shuddered violently, sending them both tumbling. Sarah gasped, the breath knocked out of her. Dust swirled around them, thick and choking. "Sarah! Get up!" Paul roared, panic igniting behind his eyes. She scrambled to her feet, heart racing, but the shadows loomed larger now, laughter echoed, and her mind reeled under their suffocating weight. A glimmer of light flashed ahead, a break in the blackness, and they scrambled toward it, drawn as if by a magnet. Just before reaching it, she caught a glimpse of that ghastly shadow behind them, the grotesque form, twisting and thrashing. It lurked so close she felt its breath on her neck. "Faster!" Paul shouted. They surged forward, tearing straight into the light, but as they did, the ground cracked open beneath them. A blinding flash illuminated a grotesque tableau, shadows curling and writhing in a shimmering, ethereal glow. Pale, hollow eyes stared back at them, mouths twisted into silent screams. They were trapped, ensnared by the phantoms of the cursed mine. "No, no, no!" Sarah cried, eyes wide with horror. The walls pulsed and shifted, revealing faces, tortured and pleading, muffled voices reaching out with outstretched hands. "Paul!" She wheeled around, desperation mounting. "What do we do?" Staring at the faces, Paul's face drained of color as reality set in. I think they're trying to tell us something." But as the walls pressed in closer, shadows clawing toward them, a terrible realization washed over her. What if this was more than just an escape? What if they had to make a choice? With the shadows closing in, she whispered, "What if we have to sacrifice something to leave?" Before he could respond, a surge of darkness enveloped them, pulling them deeper into the chamber, with the souls crying out in despair. What were they willing to lose to escape the mine? As the walls pulsated with dread, an overwhelming choice loomed ahead. Would they dare to confront their deepest fears? The shadows rippled, pressing in tighter as the horrific faces merged into one gnawing thing. Their mouths moved in sync, silently begging, teetering between anger and despair. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out everything else. A crushing fear gripped her. She was losing control, losing herself to the chaos around them. "Paul, we can't stay here!" she yelled, the tremor in her voice barely masking the panic within. "Then what?" he shouted back, eyes wild. The atmosphere thickened as cold fingers of dread wrapped around their throats. It felt as if the mine breathed, a living creature poised to swallow them whole. "We have to make a decision." Her voice emerged as a desperate whisper, surrounded by the cacophony of despairing souls. "We need to give something up. But what will it be?" Paul's brow furrowed in thought, terror lacing his features. What about fear?" he suggested weakly. "Maybe if we let it go, fear is all we have." Sarah shot back, shaking her head fiercely. What if whatever that voice was means something else? What if we suddenly, a clawing sensation raked the back of her mind, filled with memories, faded laughter, the warmth of sunlight, and a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in ages. It was brutally visceral. What if we lost our memories? The very idea made her stomach turn. Would she sacrifice her past to save her future? A ghostly wail cut through her thoughts, the shadows twisting about them like barbed vines. "Forget," they hissed, a chorus of lost dreams and broken promises. Was this the answer? The darkness writhed with anger, the disembodied voices turning frantic. "Sarah! Focus!" Paul gripped her shoulders, intensity ablaze in his eyes. "We can't let this place control us. It feeds off us." Suddenly, he pointed past the grotesque faces, deeper into the shadowy confines of the mine. "Look! There's another light." Before Sarah could respond, a tidal wave of darkness surged forward. They barely had time to react as the spectral figures lunged, clawing at her and Paul, their pleas swelling to a deafening roar. "Don't let it take you!" Paul shouted. "It wants to drown us in our past. We can't lose ourselves." With a frantic leap, Sarah pulled Paul along, dodging the grasping hands. They ran toward the glimmers of light, the wisps dancing just out of reach. Each step felt like a leap through quicksand, the ground trembling beneath them, as if alive, breathing as the shadows writhed more aggressively. Keep going. Paul yelled, his face set in determination. They ran, and with every step, Sarah felt the weight of memories clawing at her, dragging her to a dark engulfing abyss. What if they were right? What if this was all a trick, some terrible trap to keep them here forever? Dread rooted her to the unstable ground, but each stride was a lifeline. Each moment of desperation pushed her forward further into the light. As they neared the portal, a searing scream rocked through the mine, filled with fury and anguish. You cannot escape yourself. The shadows howled, a cacophony of voices enveloping them. With a final burst of energy, they lunged into the light. The world around them exploded in blinding brightness that swallowed the shadowy whispers whole. And then, just as sudden, they fell completely into an endless void of nothingness. Sarah gasped, clinging to the fleeting hope that perhaps they'd made it. But beneath her, the ground shifted again, and that same gut-churning dread gnawed at her insides. She turned to Paul, question burning in her eyes. What if this isn't done yet? What if we made the wrong choice? Before he could respond, the darkness crept back, rapidly consuming the light behind them. Whatever happens next, we need to be ready, Paul said, his voice a mixture of fear and resolve. Would they confront their darkest truths, or was there something more lurking in the shadows that awaited their next move? The void began to swirl with an eerie luminescence, distorting the shadows into unimaginable shapes. Sarah squinted against the brightness, desperate to grasp anything that resembled solid ground. Paul stood beside her, his expression a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. Stay close. He shouted. We can't let it separate us. The ground beneath them felt unstable, as if it were shifting like sand, and the air thickened with an unsettling energy. They could hear whispers now, clearer than before, creeping into their minds, echoes of lost souls lingering just beyond sight. Help us, they implored, a haunting wail that gnawed at Sarah's heart. Don't listen. Paul grabbed her hand, pulling her forward as they stumbled against an invisible force. Each step felt like a battle as the weight of despair clawed at them from behind. She turned, horror gripping her as she caught a glimpse of figures emerging from the shadows. Their faces twisted with longing and pain, eyes hollow yet full of fury. We're going the wrong way. Sarah cried, heart racing. The very air now felt colder, the fading light stinging her skin. No. Paul breathed, looking around. We've got to find a way out before he could finish. A sudden rush of wind erupted from nowhere, swirling leaves of darkness around them like a storm. They were thrown off balance, crashing to the ground. Sarah gasped as icy fingers brushed her neck, a simultaneous strangling sensation overcoming her. Get up! Paul shouted, pulling her to her feet again. They darted through the chaos, navigating through jagged rocks and twisting paths that seemed to shift with every passing second. The whispers escalated, morphing into a cacophony of agonized screams blended with laughter. You can't escape. You will never forget. Sweat streamed down Sarah's face, her breath quickening. What do they want from us? She panted, panic inching closer. Paul's grip tightened. We need to break the cycle. Whatever holds them here, it wants us to surrender. His words ignited a whirring fire of determination within her. Then we won. We'll find a way to break free. A faint glimmer flickered in the corner of her eye, and she paused, caught in the glow that promised hope a door. There! She shouted. The exit! But no sooner had the word left her mouth than the ground roared, and the dark energy surged like a wave, slamming them back to the soil. Shadows coiled around her legs, slithering like serpents, pulling her back. You must listen. They cried, their voices intertwining into a single chilling resonance. Sarah! Paul yelled, fighting against the suffocating pull. Hold on. Close your eyes. Heart pounding, she squeezed her eyes shut. Memories flashed her childhood home, the warmth of her mother's embrace, moments of joy, laughter. But mingled among those were flashes of pain, regret, and sorrow. Would she really have to let go of everything? Think about what you want to keep. Paul's voice cut through the darkness like a beacon. Not what they want. She inhaled deeply, focusing on the warmth of love and happiness. I won't forget. Her voice rang clear, defiance wrapping around her like armor. The shadows twisted harder, shrieking in rage, but she felt the pull begin to loosen. Together, Paul urged, now at her side. We'll face this. With a newfound strength, they reached for each other, willing the darkness to release its grip. The air shifted, an otherworldly hum vibrating around them, growing to a deafening pitch. No, you can tee. The shadows wailed, desperation threading through the oppressive atmosphere as the door began to widen. Just as they edged closer to the exit, a searing light erupted around them. The shadows screamed, a horrendous sound piercing through the revelation. I can't hold it. Paul gasped. It's too strong. And then, just beyond the threshold, something flickered. A familiar figure stood waiting, eyes gleaming with sorrow. Help us, it whispered, and Sarah's heart froze. Who are you? She choked out, her resolve wavering. Could hope really be trapped in this nightmare? The figure stepped forward, and an overwhelming wave of fear swept over her. What truth awaited behind those pleading eyes? Would they run toward light or deeper into the darkness? Sarah, we have to go now. Paul shouted, shaking her back to reality. But in that moment of hesitation, the shadows lunged forward, desperate to pull them back from the brink. The portal flickered and flickered, a heartbeat away from vanishing entirely. Would Sarah's memories save them, or would they be consumed in the chaos of forgotten dreams? The blinding light engulfed them, bursting forth like a wave crashing against the shore. But instead of safety, it felt more like a trap, the brilliance seizing Sarah in its grip, tugging her apart at the seams. The shadows shrieked, their cries echoing off the walls of the descending abyss, and she could feel their fury clawing at her like a pack of feral beasts. Sarah! Paul yelled, but his voice dimmed, swallowed by the light's intensity. With every instinct screaming at her to flee, Sarah felt the ground tremble. A fissure opened beneath them, jagged and dark, inviting yet menacing. The shadows writhed, a roiling mass of desperation, amplifying their cacophony. Stay with us. We know what you fear. Don't listen. Paul's voice broke through the chaos. Keep holding on. She squeezed her eyes shut tighter, but the urge to look was maddening. The glimmer of the figure lingered in her mind. It felt like a memory, but not one she could name. She had to know. If this was the last thing she did, she would stare into the abyss and find out who was beckoning her down that path. Then she opened her eyes, and the light pulled back, revealing the figure again, now more defined, no longer a mere flicker. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. It was her mother. The same eyes, the same warmth, but the features were skewed, warped by a shadow's touch, tears falling like rain from her porcelain cheeks, lost in a cycle of anguish. Help us, she whispered again, her voice a ghost, but unmistakably familiar. Mom. The word escaped Sarah's lips like a stray bird. Is it really you? Paul's grip tightened painfully as he strained against the shadows that still lashed toward them. Focus on us, Sarah. We have to go. But desperation overwhelmed her, pulling at her heartstrings with unseen hands. What do you want? Sarah cried out, teetering between hope and horror. Why are you trapped here? Because you let us down, the figure intoned, though it wasn't a voice Sarah recognized. It transformed into a chorus of lost souls, moaning regret, the air thick with longing and unsettling echo of choices made and paths untraveled. You must know the truth to be free, Sarah, please. Paul urged, pulling at her with a newfound strength. This isn't her. It's a trap. Yet Sarah felt herself drawn closer to her mother's apparent sorrow. I can't leave you. Not like this. Tears streamed down her face, combining with the swirling mist around her, soaking into the fractured ground. In that moment, the shadows lunged again, wrapping around her ankles with icy tendrils. They pulled her back from the figure, chanting, "You cannot know the truth. You cannot remember what you lost." For an instant, clarity jolted through her. The shadows fed on her fear, her grief, and their scream a symphony of pain was both seduction and warning. They didn't want freedom, they wanted her to remain anchored in despair. "No," she shouted, digging her nails into the ground. "I will not let you take me. I choose to remember." With a wild scream, she broke free from their grip, lunging towards Paul. The light surged again, pulsing like a heartbeat, dragging them closer to the portal. Yet the familiar figure reached out a trembling hand, and Sarah hesitated, caught between otherworldly sorrow and Paul's fierce determination. "Come back," it begged, its face melting into shadows, lost to despair. "Sarah, come on." Paul's fear propelled him forward, but her heart was torn as the wails crescendoed, morphing into an unbearable melody of sorrow. "Let me go." The words slipped from her lips, as if she were relinquishing her very essence. But then something in her shifted. "I refuse to be your pawn. I will fight." And as if awakened, the shadows recoiled, shrieking in a chorus of despair. The light flickered, then intensified, its heat flooding her senses. Together, they flung themselves toward the glowing doorway, the chaos snapping and howling behind them. "Hold on!" Paul cried, clutching her with a grip that felt more like a lifeline. They surged forward together, but just when escape felt certain, the figure screeched. "Anew. Remember who you abandoned." It echoed, the last remnants of the voice twisting in anguish. They plunged through the threshold just as the shadows lunged one final time, an onslaught of furious energy rippling through as the beacon finally exploded into a blinding radiance, and then, silence. A chilling stillness settled, hanging heavy on their chests. They lay on unforgiving ground, panting, hearts racing a world apart from the torment they had known, but as they slowly raised their heads, a sickening dread washed over them. The sky above was blood-red, twisting into unnatural shapes. Shadows were still there, lurking at the edges. Was it worth it? A chilling whisper asked from the darkened recesses, the once familiar echo of lost dreams lingering as if it had gained form. What did you lose to break free? The new realm pulsed with darkness, and an unsettling laugh reverberated in the air. Could they ever truly escape the weight of their past? And if not, what price would they have to pay as they ventured deeper into the unknown? The ground remained trembling beneath Sarah and Paul, their escape from the dark maw of the mine leaving them breathless and raw. They sat up, disoriented, surrounded by a blood-red haze that twisted the horizon like a surreal painting come to life. It was a different world, yet undeniably shadowed by the sinister grip of the mine they had just left. The whispers that had haunted them lingered in the air, taunting and relentless. "What did we just escape?" Sarah whispered, glancing at Paul, whose expression reflected the same confusion and dread stirring in her stomach. The horrors they felt in the mine still echoed in her mind. Every scream, every pleading soul had etched itself into her very being, now woven into the fabric of her memories. Could they truly leave those terrors behind, or were they merely shadows that would follow? Paul shook his head, trying to dispel the fear clouding their surroundings. "We're alive," he said forcefully, though the conviction in his voice wobbled. "That has to count for something. Alive, but at what cost?" Her voice cracked, the tremors of fear still gripping her. She thought of the shadows, the painful faces that had twisted through time, each soul a reminder of the price of ignorance, the price she might still have to pay. Suddenly, a shape flickered at the edge of her vision. "Do you see that?" she shouted, pointing toward the darkness that clawed at the edges of this new realm, where the horizon twisted with anxiety and uncertainty. "Yes." Paul shouted back, urgency lacing his voice. He took a step forward, putting space between them and the ominous pulse. "We need to find our way out before it catches up, whatever it is." But as they moved, the shadows began to shift, coalescing into forms both familiar and dreadful. Faces emerged in the haze, tilting as if recognizing them, mirroring their own expressions of horror. Caught in the singer's chorus of despair, Sarah felt her heart sink as agony twisted around her chest. "Sarah!" Paul's voice broke through her daze, pulling her back. "They're calling to you. Just keep moving." She shook her head, tears welling. "I can't." The haunting faces in the darkness filled her mind. What if they are right? What if we still have something to confront? "We have to confront something, yes," he urged, "but it's not them. It's the darkness in ourselves we need to face." He took her shoulders, imparting a desperate strength. "We can't get dragged back into those shadows. We need to confess our truths." Suddenly, a voice broke through the cacophony, a deeper, more anguished echo. It reverberated within her mind, wrapping around her heart like a serpent. "You came back, Sarah, to pay the price," it hissed, sending chills along her spine. That same figure, her mother, stepped towards them again, shrouded in anguish. Mom. Sarah's voice trembled, fear eating at her resolve. "What do you want?" "Help us, my child," the shadows melded into soft words, but the sorrow in her mother's eyes stirred an urgency that clawed at Sarah's soul. "To escape, you must break the cycle." "What cycle?" Sarah whispered. The truth lay like a boulder in her throat, but just as quickly, Paul stepped between her and the memories swirling like fog. "This isn't your mother. It's another trap," Paul declared, stepping closer. "It's feeding off your emotions. We need to stand together." At his words, Sarah steadied herself, heart pounding, determined to reclaim her freedom. The depths of the mind still clawed at her mind. "We cannot allow fear to dictate our choices any longer," she said, glancing around. "I choose to fight." With renewed strength, they both stood tall against the echoing shadows. "You want us to remember?" "Fine. I remember love, hope, and the moments that matter," she shouted, drawing on the warmth that filled her heart. As if in reaction to her words, the shadows recoiled, their cries morphing into desperate howls. "You cannot take what is yours," they screeched, surging forward in a wave of terror, but Sarah and Paul held firm, the bond between them igniting like a beacon through the storm of dark memories, driving forward. They pressed on into the darkness, hands clasped tightly, sifting through layers of fears, and pouring forth the essence of what they valued. "This is our truth," Paul exclaimed, his voice cutting through chaos. "You don't control who we are. We are more than our past." Sarah added, her chest rising with every word. "We get to decide what's worth carrying. We refuse to be shackled by you." A blinding light erupted as they crushed the grip of shadows spiraling toward them. The pain, the fear, the haunting cries of anguish surged forward, unraveling around them. In that moment, the shadows converged, acrid and wrenching, the weight lifting, a paradigm shift igniting, the darkness fractured, and before them was a path bathed in golden light, warm and inviting, dissipating the despair. It was time to move forward, laying their burdens to rest. Together, they made their way toward the light that would lead them home. The shadowy forms began to fade, no longer clawing but drifting into nothingness. They stepped through the threshold, tears mingling with relief. As they emerged into the dawn, the sun greeted them with warmth. It spread like a promise, bright and unwavering. They were standing on solid ground again, free of the mind's grip, able to rebuild the lives they had once known. "Are you ready?" Paul asked, glancing at Sarah with newfound hope, an echo of resilience in his eyes. "More than ever," Sarah replied with a bittersweet smile. The memories would always be a part of them, but they would move forward, determined to reclaim their destiny without the weight of burdened shadows. They walked side by side into their future, one step at a time, ready to face the light of a new day, their truth shining unwavering through every choice ahead. This is how fear is conquered, and through connection, lives are restored. If you experience this journey with us, don't let the shadows win. You need to subscribe to the channel now, so you don't miss exclusive stories that keep you at the edge of your seat. Smash the like button to feed the algorithm and ensure more thrilling tales come your way. We want to hear from you. Flood the comments with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this intense ending. Share this video right this second with 5 friends who need to discover the strength of facing their darkness together. Don't wait even one more second to support the channel and claim your place in our story community.